I steady my breath as the faint rustle of linen brushes against the wooden floor beneath me, the room steeped in the gentle dimness of midnight. Outside, the air is cool and still, carrying the scent of damp earth softened by a recent rain. This hour holds a quiet wait, a pause before the world stirs anew. And here, in this small chamber, I find myself anchored by the narrow glow of a single oil lamp. I am a scribe by calling, not one who merely copies words, but one who listens to the spaces between them, seeking the stories that tremble just beneath the surface. Tonight, my hands are restless, poised to trace ink across parchment, though my heart lingers with something unspoken, a tether to what waits beyond these walls. I do not speak simply to fill silence, but because something unsettles the calm, a quiet need to breathe life into what still hangs in shadow. The reason I speak now is a fragile one, born of a night stretched thin with memory and waiting. There is a letter, folded carefully and sealed with dark wax, resting beside my desk. Its presence hums quietly beneath the lamp's flicker, a promise or a warning I have yet to unravel. I hold this small weight in my palm as if it might pulse with the breath of the one who sent it, a reminder that even in stillness, the world turns with unseen forces. A faint warmth seeps from the cover of the letter, barely perceptible, but real enough to brush against my skin like the trace of a sigh. It stirs something within me, an ache folded into the slow unfolding of this night, a tension between patience and urgency. The lamp's glow deepens the shadows that gather in the corners, and I feel the cool stone beneath my feet grounding me, steadying the currents of anticipation that rise and fall like distant waves. If you'll stay a moment with me here, I will share this quiet vigil, not with hurry or demand, but with the slow unfolding of night's own rhythm. Together, we can lean into the soft edges of this hour, where every breath and every shadow speaks in whispers. There is a journey waiting in the stillness, a quiet transformation hinted at by the flicker of flame and the hush that settles like a gentle promise. Before we go farther, listen with me to how the air moves through this place, the faint sigh of wind weaving softly around the eaves, the gentle creak of wood settling, the distant drip of rain gathering in the gutters. Feel the warmth of the lamp's glow on your skin and the coolness that rests beneath it as the night breathes quietly around us. We'll start with the room itself and the way it holds its breath. The chamber wraps around me like a quiet breath held in the dark, its walls rough with cold stone, damp to the touch where the night's chill seeps through. My fingers rest lightly against the uneven surface, tracing the faint grooves left by time's slow hand. The floor beneath is worn wood, its grain coarse but steady underfoot, the edges softened where countless steps have passed before mine. Above me, the low ceiling catches the flicker of a single oil lamp, its flame trembling softly as if breathing with a life of its own, casting shadows that stretch and fold with deliberate grace. The air holds the scent of smoldering resin and faint traces of earth disturbed long ago, mingling with the subtle weight of ink and parchment from my scattered tools. Here, every surface speaks in texture and scent, a silent language I know well, and I move within it as if in a slow, familiar dance. Outside, the wind hums like a distant song, threading through narrow cracks and slipping beneath the door, carrying with it the faint murmur of water far beyond the hills. The sound is patient and unhurried, a steady current that pulls at the edges of the quiet inside. Occasionally, a soft rustle stirs the heavy fabric of the curtain hanging near the window, its slow sway marking the passing breath of the night. Somewhere beyond, an owl calls once, a solitary note that rises and falls like a whispered question. I listen, letting these sounds gather around me, anchoring me deeper into the stillness, each one a thread woven into the fabric of this hour. The room itself feels alive in its silence, a vessel holding the soft weight of waiting. The air grows cooler as I shift, a subtle draft brushing against my skin where the cloak falls open at the collar. I adjust the fabric with a gentle tug, the coarse wool rough but comforting in its familiarity. My hands linger on the smooth curve of the wooden table beside me, the surface warmed faintly by the lamp's glow, its grain cool beneath my touch, yet alive with the memory of countless hours spent here. I breathe in slowly, tasting the faint bitterness of herbs dried and stored just out of sight, their scent mingled with smoke that curls upward in slow spirals from a small brazier left to smolder low. This mingling of warmth and chill, the contrast of textures and scents, settles around me like a quiet companion, a balm for the edges of my restless mind. My eyes follow the slow dance of the lamp's flame, watching how it breathes light across the walls, painting them in soft pools and deepening shadows. The glow reveals the faintest shimmer of moisture on the stone, catching like distant stars caught in an unseen web. In the corner, the dark shape of a folded cloth rests, its fabric worn and folded with care, a silent sentinel that holds the weight of unspoken promise. I reach out, my fingers brushing the fabric's edge, feeling the coolness there, a small, steady anchor against the drifting night. The room's quiet patience mirrors the stillness within me, a calm threaded with a trace of something waiting to unfold. The scent of rain lingers faintly on the air, damp earth and resin mingling beneath the lamp's warmth, grounding me in this moment between wakefulness and sleep. I draw a slow breath, the coolness filling my lungs before it slips away like a secret. My gaze moves to the small window where the moon casts pale stripes across the floor, soft as whispered silk. The silver light blends with the lamp's amber glow, folding the space in layers of warmth and cool, shadow and light. I feel the weight of the night settle over my shoulders, a gentle cloak that both comforts and stirs a quiet expectancy deep within. The chamber breathes with me, each inhalation a shared rhythm, each exhalation a soft surrender to this moment's embrace. A faint crackle rises from the brazier, the slow pop of burning resin, like the murmur of old stories stirring in the dark. I lean forward slightly, tracing the drifting smoke as it curls upward, delicate and elusive, before fading into the stillness above. The scent moves with it, resin sharp and sweet, mingling with the earthiness of damp stone and the whisper of dried herbs tucked away in shadow. These small details, the warmth of the flame, the coolness of stone, the scent of smoke, compose a quiet symphony that fills the room with a presence older than my restless thoughts. I close my eyes for a moment, letting the textures and sounds settle into the quiet folds of memory and breath. My hand lingers on the edge of the table, fingertips brushing the worn wood as if reading the lines it holds. The stillness here is not empty. It is a vessel cradling the weight of time itself. This place is more than stone and flame. It hums with stories older than me, whispered in the creak of wood and the pulse of shadow. It waits, patient and deep, holding its breath beneath the surface of silence. Before I speak of myself, you should know what lives here long before me, in the quiet spaces between each breath and each shadow. The air is not empty. It remembers. Soon, I will tell you what it carries. I remember how my mother's voice would rise softly in the evening, weaving stories of the world as it once was, an expanse ruled not only by men, but by the unseen threads of gods and spirits that touched every breath. We lived in the age of the Elder Tree Kingdom, where the land stretched wide beneath a sky heavy with stars, and the borders between earth and sky often seemed as thin as the veil between waking and dreaming. The elders spoke of the ancients, those who shaped the rivers and mountains with their will, and whose favor shaped the fortunes of our people. Their stories were not mere tales, but living truths carried in the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind through village fields. Daylight in our village was a slow unfolding of ritual and labor. The scent of bread baking mingled with the sharp tang of iron tools striking stone as the smiths worked near the river's edge. Women moved with practiced grace, weaving threads of flax into cloth, the rough fibers cool beneath their fingers, while children's laughter danced like sunlight on the dusty paths. Each morning, before the sun rose fully, the calls of prayer would drift from the temple atop the hill, a chorus of voices lifted in chant, mingling with the soft murmur of the river and the rustling of grain stalks heavy with dew. The rhythms of work and worship were intertwined, a daily offering to the gods who watched over us, shaping the seasons and the fate of each hand that toiled. Our belief was rooted deeply in the presence of the Sky Mother and the Earth Father, twin deities who held the balance of all life. The Sky Mother, with her star-woven veil, guided the cycles of the moon and the tides, while the Earth Father, steadfast and silent, nurtured the soil beneath our feet. Between them flowed the spirit wind, a force both gentle and fierce, set to carry the prayers of the living to the realm of the ancients. These gods were not distant figures, but companions in every step, a whispered blessing in the morning breeze, a warning in the sudden stillness before a storm. Their symbols adorned our homes, carved stones etched with swirling patterns, representing the eternal dance of sky and earth, and small offerings of herbs and resin left at crossroads to honor their presence. Our rulers were neither distant monarchs nor tyrants, but guardians chosen by the temple priesthood, who claimed descent from the first of the ancients. The High Keeper, robed in deep indigo and crowned with woven silver, presided over the sacred rites and laws that bound our community. His voice, calm and measured, could still a restless crowd or summon the village to feast or fast. Though his authority was great, it was tempered by the council of elders and the wisdom of the priests who read the omens in the flight of birds and the patterns of the stars. The land itself was seen as a living testament to their rule, each stone and tree a witness to the pact between mortal and divine. One memory lingers sharp and clear, the festival of the first light, held each year when the moon waned to its thinnest sliver, and the dawn's first rays touched the temple steps. We gathered beneath banners dyed in crimson and gold, their edges fluttering like the wings of sacred birds. The air was thick with the scent of incense, sweet myrrh, and sharp cedar that wound its way through the crowd, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil. The priests chanted in low, rolling tones, their voices rising and falling like the river's own song, as they presented the carved stone of destiny, a smooth, palm-sized relic etched with the intertwining signs of a sky and earth. It was said to hold the fate of the coming year, a symbol that bound us all to the cycles that governed our lives. I grew up cradled within these threads of belief and duty, my family tending the sacred gardens that clothed the temple grounds in herbs and blossoms. My father's hands, calloused and steady, taught me the language of the earth, the feel of soft moss beneath my palm, the subtle change in scent when rain was near. My mother's voice, gentle and sure, recited prayers that rose like smoke from our hearth, carrying hopes for health and harvest. This world was the rhythm of my breath, the pulse beneath my feet, and the quiet pull in my chest when stars blinked alive overhead. Within it, I learned the weight of tradition and the delicate balance between silence and speech. The time of my childhood was marked by a sacred stillness, a fragile peace held in the waiting breath between storms. The fields bore fruit, the rivers ran steady, and the nights were filled with the soft chorus of crickets and distant owl calls. Yet beneath this calm lay the ever-present hum of expectation, the knowledge that the gods' favor could shift as swiftly as the wind, and that destiny was a path walked carefully, step by uncertain step. It was a world alive with whispers, where every shadow and every flicker of flame held meaning, and where even the smallest gesture might carry the weight of unseen forces. And it was in this age, beneath the watchful eyes of gods and guardians, that one like me would soon find a place. Among such prayers and the steady turning of seasons, my life began to take shape, woven quietly into the fabric of this sacred realm. It is from within this world, with its rituals and silences, that I must now tell you who I was. My hands bear the faint stains of ink, a deep indigo that never quite washes away, clinging beneath my nails and along the creases of my palms like a secret I carry close. When the flicker of the oil lamp catches my hair, it reveals strands dark as river water at midnight, tangled lightly from long hours, bent over scrolls and tablets. My posture is often bowed, not from weakness, but from the weight of stories and knowledge pressing gently upon my shoulders. Others see me in varied ways, some with respect, nodding as I pass through the hallways, lined with stone and whispering prayers. Their eyes linger briefly on the small amulet I wear, a smooth stone carved with the symbol of the spirit wind, hanging low against my chest, as if tethering me to the unseen forces that shape our lives. Yet, there are those who shrink away in suspicion, their voices dropping to murmurs behind their hands, unsure of the quiet figure who watches and records, but speaks little. To some, I am merely a shadow, a fixture as unchanging as the temple walls. To others, perhaps something more, an enigma wrapped in the scent of ink and resin. I often wonder how I appear to myself beneath these layers of perception. I feel the stillness within me, a calm that borders on restlessness, as if my spirit listens to a song only it can hear. My voice is soft, rarely raised beyond the gentle cadence of recitation or the murmur of thought, but when it does rise, it carries a weight that unsettles the air. I know I am more than the sum of my quiet hours. There is a subtle pulse beneath my skin, a sense that the words I write and the silence I keep are threads in a loom far larger than any one life. Yet, I carry this knowledge with a certain solitude, as if the gift I hold isolates me even as it defines me. The amulet I wear is more than ornament. It is a symbol of my connection to the spirit wind, a reminder of the unseen currents that guide fate and whisper secrets in the stillness. Its surface is worn smooth from years of touch, the carved lines softened but never erased. I find myself tracing its edges in moments of doubt or quiet reflection, feeling in its cold stone a tangible link to the mysteries that shape our days. This small talisman anchors me, a constant companion in the shifting tides of belief and destiny. In this place, I hold the role of scribe, not merely a recorder of events, but a guardian of memory, entrusted with the sacred task of preserving the words that bind our past to our future. My days are spent within the temple's shadowed halls, surrounded by scrolls and tablets, the scent of aged parchment mingling with the faint smoke of incense. I move quietly among priests and elders, neither fully part of their circle nor entirely outside it. My place is one of observation and reflection, a quiet presence woven into the rhythms of worship and study. There is a peculiar stillness that settles within me at times, a feeling like the breath held before a storm breaks. It is this quiet anticipation, a seed of something strange and unspoken, that colors my thoughts, a sense that my path is not merely to record, but perhaps to shape what is recorded. Sometimes, in the depths of night, I dream of winds that carry voices not yet heard, or of stones that glow faintly beneath the moon, as if waiting to reveal secrets only I can decipher. These restless stirrings are both a comfort and a weight, hinting at a fate that will not be easily dismissed. Beneath the calm exterior lies a solitude that few perceive, a loneliness born not from absence, but from the knowledge that my understanding separates me from others. There is pride in my role, yes, but also a quiet burden, the sense that the words I hold are fragile, that the balance between silence and speech is a delicate one. I move through the days aware of this tension, carrying it as one carries a fragile flame, carefully, always mindful of its flicker. To truly know me, you must follow me back to where it all began. Every scar, every whisper that brushes my skin and mind has its root in the soil from which I was drawn. It is there, in the unspoken past, beneath the layered memories of family and place, that the story of who I am waits to be told. The village nestled against a restless sea, its wooden docks creaking under the weight of morning light, and fishermen's voices calling across the waves. The sun rose slowly, casting a pale gold over narrow streets lined with worn stone and weathered timber, where children chased each other barefoot along dusty paths that smelled of seaweed and wood smoke. Here, life unfolded in the rhythm of tides and seasons, a steady pulse that seemed both eternal and fragile. My earliest memories are of the soft hum of the harbor at dawn, the distant call of gulls, the splash of oars, the low murmur of voices greeting the day. At the heart of my childhood stood my mother, her hands always busy weaving or tending to the hearth's fire, her voice a gentle current, carrying stories and lullabies that wrapped around me like a woven shawl. My father was a quiet man, his hands rough from years of hauling nets and repairing boats, his eyes steady and calm as the sea before a storm. From my earliest days, an elder named Lyra often visited, a woman whose presence was like the whisper of wind through the olive branches, soft, knowing, and full of unspoken wisdom. These figures shaped the contours of my world. Their love and guidance rooted me in the simple certainties of home, even as the sea beyond hinted at mysteries I could not yet grasp. Daily life moved in a gentle cadence, measured by the rising and setting sun. Mornings began with the scent of freshly baked bread, mingling with salty air, the warmth of clay bowls filled with thick, honeyed porridge, resting against my hands. I learned to gather herbs with my mother, feeling the rough leaves and stems beneath my fingers, their fragrances mingling, mint, rosemary, sage, each a small gift from the earth. Afternoons were filled with chores and play, helping mend nets, carrying water from the well, racing with other children through fields where the grass was cool beneath bare feet. We offered prayers before the hearth, small rituals whispered to the Mother of Sky and Father of Earth, beseeching their balance and favor. In these moments, the world felt at once vast and intimate, a tapestry woven from the ordinary and the sacred. As a child, I knew safety in the fold of my family and wonder in the endless horizon where sea met sky. Yet there were shadows too, times when the wind carried unfamiliar voices and the night's silence thickened with a distant unease. I recall a particular evening when, beneath a moon veiled in mist, I awoke to find a strange light flickering beyond the window, a soft, bluish glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, neither fire nor star. It left me breathless, a quiet omen that whispered of paths yet unwalked. That night, a dream came to me, a tree vast beyond measure, its roots tangled deep within the earth, its branches brushing stars unknown. The dream felt less like sleep and more like a calling, a thread pulling me towards something greater than the shorelines of my youth. One memory holds itself close, vivid as the scent of pine after rain. I was no more than 7 when I wandered beyond the village, drawn by the sound of rushing water. There, hidden in a cleft between ancient stones, I found a pool fed by a cool spring. The water was clear and cold, and as I leaned over its surface, I glimpsed not just my own reflection, but the flicker of shapes beneath, faces perhaps, or spirits of the land murmuring secrets. I sat by that pool until dusk, feeling both fear and fascination entwined within me, a moment suspended between childhood and something unknowable. It was there that I first understood the weight of silence and the power of what lies beneath the surface of things. The land and its stories seeped into my bones, the rugged cliffs, the whispering grasses, the endless sky above. Our people lived in harmony with the tides and the seasons, bound by ancient rites and the quiet respect owed to the Mother of Sky and Father of Earth. The culture was sacred, yet simple, filled with songs and offerings, where every birth and death threaded into the great cycle of life. Yet beneath this peace lay the knowledge of hardship, the sea's fury, the hunger of winter, the fragile balance of survival. These forces shaped me, teaching patience and resolve, grounding my spirit even as it yearned for the mysteries beyond the horizon. But childhood is never eternal. The world soon came calling. Those early days, wrapped in the comfort of hearth and sea, were but the opening verses of a story that would carry me far beyond familiar shores. Change waited quietly, like the turning of a page, ready to lead me toward trials that would test the roots I had grown and the dreams that had taken seed beneath that vast coastal sky. I remember the first time hunger gnawed at my small frame, a slow, aching emptiness that no honeyed porridge could quite soothe. It came during a season when the sea was restless and the catch meager, and the village's stores dwindled until even the herbs we gathered tasted faint and bitter on my tongue. The scent of damp earth mixed with smoke from sparse fires, and the sky hung low, heavy with dark clouds that promised rain but gave only cold wind. In those days, the steady rhythm of the tides was broken, and with it, the quiet certainty of our lives. Amid this scarcity, I was given my first true task, to carry water from the distant well to the temple steps, a journey that demanded more than my thin legs seemed ready for. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the weight of the clay jar burned against my palm, its rough surface blistering my skin. Each step felt like a test of endurance, the dry dust rising in small clouds beneath my feet, mingling with the salt of sweat on my brow. I stumbled more than once, the jar threatening to slip, but the thought of failing those who depended on me stirred a stubborn determination within. When I finally arrived, breathless and trembling, the relief was sharp as the cool water I poured into waiting vessels. It was a small victory, yet it marked a turning point, an awakening to the burden of responsibility and the fragile strength I could summon when pressed. Not all trials came from labor alone. One afternoon, under a pale dawn sky, a clash unfolded between me and a boy from the village. His words were sharp, laced with jealousy and suspicion, accusing me of harboring secrets too deep for one so young. Our voices rose, harsh commands and angry shouts echoing against stone walls, until silence fell heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. That moment left a bitter taste, like the metallic tang of blood when I bit my lip to hold back tears. It was the first time I felt the sting of alienation, the fragile thread of belonging strained by doubt and fear. Yet beneath the shame, a flicker of resolve grew. I would not be undone by suspicion or scorn, though their weight pressed hard upon my spirit. Amid these struggles, a strange event cast a shadow deeper than the storms around us. One evening, as the village huddled beneath a sky thick with thunderclouds, a sudden stillness fell. The wind dropped away, and the air grew heavy, carrying an unspoken message. I stepped outside, drawn by a quiet pulse that seemed to emanate from the stone altar near the temple. There, etched faintly in the gathering dusk, a symbol glowed, a spiral of wind carved into the rock, shimmering with an otherworldly light. It was the mark of the Vento Espirito, the wind spirit, whispered of in old tales, but never seen. The sight filled me with a trembling awe. a silent promise that the path I walked was entwined with forces greater than myself. That night, beneath a sky cracked by lightning, destiny brushed against my soul in a breath of wind. These early trials shaped me in ways I could not then name. Fear visited often, the fear of failure, of loss, of the unknown. But alongside it grew a quiet resilience. I learned to steady my hands against trembling, to find courage in small acts of defiance against the shadows that threatened to consume. Each hardship etched its mark, not as wounds, but as reminders of the strength hidden beneath fragility. The cold wind that bit at my cheeks, the taste of bitter herbs, the echo of harsh voices, all became threads weaving a tapestry of resilience and awakening within me. Looking back, I see those days as the soil in which my roots first took hold, though at the time they felt like stumbling through twilight. The small storms that buffeted my youth were harbingers, faint whispers of the gales to come. They taught me the weight of silence and the power of endurance, lessons carried in the rough fabric of daily life and the whispered prayers beneath darkened skies. What I thought were mere struggles were, in truth, the shaping hands of fate beginning their work. But those were only shadows of the greater storms that lay ahead. The world beyond our village waited, its trials vast and unyielding, ready to test the fragile strength I had only begun to find. It was during the festival of the harvest moon, when the night sky spilled its dark cloak over the wooden docks and flickering torches cast restless shadows against the stone walls of the temple, that my first great test arrived. The village elders summoned me to stand before the gathered crowd, their faces solemn beneath the firelight, and declared that I must undergo the rite of passage, a trial not just of skill, but of spirit and belonging. The trial was set at the cliffs, where the restless sea met jagged rock, a place both feared and revered. The wind tore at my cloak, salt spray stinging my skin, and the cries of distant gulls mingled with the steady pounding of waves. I was to retrieve a sacred relic lost in the depths below, a task that demanded courage I was unsure I possessed. As I lowered myself toward the dark water, the cold bit through my trembling hands, the rough rope chafing my skin, and the scent of wet earth and salt filled my lungs. The sea roared, a living thing full of menace and mystery, daring me to prove my worth. Faced with the abyss, I made my choice. I would not turn away. Heart pounding like a drum beneath my ribs, I descended into the cold embrace of the water. The world narrowed to the sound of my breath, the sharp taste of salt on my lips, and the blurred shapes of rocks beneath the surface. When my fingers finally closed around the relic, a carved stone shaped like the swirling wind, I felt a surge of triumph, but also a deep, unspoken sorrow, as if the sea had claimed a piece of me in return. Climbing back to the jagged shore, soaked and shivering, I was met not with cheers, but a hushed reverence. The elder's eyes held a new regard, mingled with a shadow of uncertainty. The consequence of my choice was a shift, subtle, yet profound. I gained a new role in the village, not as a boy learning and failing, but as one who had faced the unknown and returned changed. Yet with this gain came loss, the easy camaraderie of childhood fractured, replaced by a distance I could neither explain nor bridge. The murmurs among peers were quieter now, their gazes veiled with respect or wariness. In me stirred a quiet pride, tempered by the weight of isolation. I had stepped beyond a threshold, but the path ahead was lonelier and steeper than I had imagined. In the stillness that followed, I grappled with a tide of emotions: fear of what lay beyond, sorrow for the innocence left behind, and a fierce determination kindled by the trial. Each breath I drew tasted of salt and ash, memories of firelight and crashing waves mingling with the bitter aftertaste of sacrifice. My hands trembled not from cold alone, but from the awareness that I had crossed into a new realm of being, one where every choice bore consequence, and every step could alter fate. Others saw me differently after that night, not merely as the scribe's son or the quiet boy by the temple steps, but as someone touched by the winds of change. Their eyes held questions I could not yet answer, and their silence pressed upon me like the stone floors beneath the temple, solid and unyielding. I carried the mark of that night within me, a quiet echo of the sea's roar and the relic's cold weight, reminders that I was no longer merely a keeper of stories, but a participant in the unfolding tale. That moment was a turning point, a fracture in the timeline of my life that shifted how I saw myself and how the village saw me. The boy who had stumbled under the burden of small tasks was gone. In his place stood someone who had faced darkness and emerged, altered but unbroken. The sea had not just tested my courage, it had rewritten the terms of my belonging, binding me to a destiny far beyond the quiet rhythms of the village. Yet even this was only the threshold. The true path still waited in shadow. The winds whispered of trials yet to come, heavier and more relentless than any I had known. I could feel their breath upon my neck, urging me forward into the depths of the unknown, where the fate of more than just my soul would be decided. After that turning point, the years stretched before me, like open roads, winding far beyond the familiar cliffs and quiet streets of my village. I left behind the temple's silent stones and the watchful eyes of the elders, stepping into a wider world shaped by travel and exile. My path took me through coastal towns, where the salt air was thick with the calls of merchants and the scent of fish drying in the sun, across rugged hills, where the wind scattered dust like whispered secrets, and into shadowed forests, where the canopy swallowed light and the earth smelled damp and ancient. Each step carried me farther from the boy I had been, deeper into a landscape both strange and bracing. Hardship came with relentless rhythm. Hunger gnawed at my belly. Through long, cold nights, storms drenched me to the bone, leaving my cloak heavy and stiff. Fatigue settled in my limbs like a stone I could not shake, and rejection marked me as an outsider among unfamiliar faces. I remember nights spent huddled beneath a ragged cloak, listening to rain strike the rough stone of a derelict shelter, the taste of stale bread and bitter herbs lingering on my tongue. Each trial tested more than my body. It carved patience into my spirit, teaching me to endure without complaint and to find calm in the bleakest moments. Along the way, I encountered teachers who offered scraps of wisdom, strangers who shared brief kindnesses, and rival wanderers whose scorn sharpened my resolve. In bustling marketplaces filled with the clang of metal and the murmur of foreign tongues, I learned to read signs and barter with careful words. Beneath starry skies, I traded stories with travelers whose faces were etched by distant lands, their voices weaving new patterns into my understanding of the world. These encounters, fleeting yet profound, opened my eyes to the vastness beyond my birthright and the threads that connect all who wander. From this tapestry of experience, I gathered skills both practical and unseen. I learned to write with steady hands, tracing symbols that carried meaning and memory across time. I studied the healing arts from a weathered woman who spoke softly of roots and balms, her hands rough but gentle as they tended wounds. Most of all, I cultivated patience, an unyielding quiet that allowed me to listen deeply and wait without despair. This slow accumulation of knowledge and craft became my armor against uncertainty, a foundation to stand upon as the world shifted beneath my feet. The years of wandering reshaped my view of myself and all I once believed certain. I came to understand that strength was not only in muscle or courage, but in humility, the grace to admit ignorance, the willingness to learn, and the resilience to rise after each fall. The landscapes I crossed mirrored the changes within, mountains that demanded endurance, rivers that taught surrender, and deserts where silence spoke louder than words. The journey was both lonely and sacred, a long unfolding of self beneath endless skies and shifting stars. One night remains etched in my memory, a night beneath a vast canopy of stars, far from any village or firelight. I had found shelter in the hollow of an ancient oak, its bark rough against my back, the air filled with the scent of pine and cold earth. As I lay beneath that silent sky, a stranger approached, offering warm bread and a cup of sweet wine without a word. The simple act of kindness, shared in the stillness and vastness of that moment, became a symbol of the unexpected grace found in wandering. It reminded me that even in isolation, connection could be found, and that the world held both hardship and generosity in delicate balance. Reflecting now, those years of travel and toil were the slow shaping of my soul. Each hardship, a chisel stroke, each encounter a whisper of something greater beyond my knowing. They taught me to move with patience, to carry both sorrow and hope in equal measure, and to listen for the quiet truths beneath noise and fear. The boy, who once carried water to the temple, had grown into someone who understood the vastness of the world and the fragile thread of belonging that ties us all. But even then, I sensed these were only the footsteps before the true trial. The wandering years, with all their lessons and losses, were not the end of my journey, but the prelude to deeper transformation yet to come. It was as if the steady rhythm of travel and toil gave way to a sudden silence, a pause pregnant with change that I could neither resist nor fully understand. That moment arrived quietly, like dawn breaking behind a veil of clouds, inevitable and profound. The catalyst came in the form of a vision, a fragment of light and shadow that seized my mind on a night when the sea's breath was heavy with salt and the air thick with incense from a distant shrine. I had sought refuge in a small village, its streets narrow and winding, filled with unfamiliar tongues and flickering lanterns. There, beneath a pale fire burning low, I was drawn into a ritual I barely comprehended, chants rising and falling like waves, a burning scent that clung to my skin and stirred something ancient within. The vision came suddenly, a mirror cracked by unseen hands, reflecting a face I no longer recognized. It was a breaking, more than physical, an unraveling of the naive, obedient self who had once believed in simple truths and safe paths. In that breaking, the part of me that clung to certainty and fear dissolved. I felt it in my limbs, a tremor like cold water lapping at worn stones, and in my chest, a hollow ache that seemed to echo with the loss of old dreams. The process was painful and raw, like fever sweat against rough cloth, or the bitter taste of ash on my tongue after a fire's glow had faded. Emotionally, it was a collapse and a rebirth all at once, the weight of betrayal and exile pressing down, yet beneath it, a flicker of something unyielding, a seed of clarity breaking through the ruin. I could not hold on to who I had been. That self was burned away, leaving only the barest bones of what was to come. This transformation found its symbol in a scar, a thin, jagged line tracing the inside of my wrist, a mark left by an iron talisman pressed during the ritual. It burned then as if alive, a reminder of the night when my old self was seared away. The scar was more than flesh. It was a vow etched into my skin, silent and sacred, binding me to a new path I could not yet see. In dreams, it glowed faintly, a pale fire beneath my skin that whispered of strength and clarity waiting to be claimed. This mark became the quiet emblem of my shifting identity, a secret worn beneath the layers of travel-stained cloaks and worn leather boots. At first, I scarcely recognized the person I had become. There was a steadiness in my gaze that had not been there before, a clarity that sliced through the fog of wandering. I moved with purpose now, the aimless steps replaced by deliberate direction, though the road itself remained uncharted. Inside, a new purpose took root, not loud or boastful, but deep and resolute. I felt the weight of wisdom settling around me, a humility born from having lost much, and yet discovered a strength that no hardship could undo. This was no longer the boy who sought belonging or approval, but someone forged by fire and silence, shaped by loss and the slow reclaiming of self. Others noticed the change, some with awe, others with distance. The villagers who once greeted me with curiosity now regarded me with a cautious respect, as if sensing the difference in my presence, but unsure what it meant. Companions who had shared the road with me stepped back, their eyes shadowed by a mix of fear and admiration, as if the transformation both inspired and unsettled them. Even the elders, who once saw me as a boy, now spoke in hushed tones, acknowledging without words that I had crossed a threshold they could neither name nor fully grasp. The distance between me and my past tightened, but it also opened a space for something new to grow. This first shedding set me on a new course, a journey not only of movement, but of inner reckoning. I began to seek out the hidden currents beneath the surface of places and people, drawn to the quiet mysteries that had once escaped my notice. My path turned toward service, a calling to protect what remained fragile and sacred in the world. The restless wandering gave way to a steady purpose, though the horizon still held shadows and uncertainty. I moved forward, carrying the scar and the vow, a quiet promise to remain true to this new self, even as the tides of fate continued to shift beneath my feet. Yet even then, I did not know. This was only the first shedding of my skin. The change within me did not remain hidden. as if the scar beneath my sleeve had begun to pulse with a life of its own, drawing the gaze of those around me like a beacon. My family, once distant and cautious, now regarded me with a mixture of reverence and unease. Peers who had shared the easy camaraderie of youth now kept their distance, their whispers trailing behind me like shadows in the dusk. Leaders of the villages I passed through weighed me with sharp eyes, their curiosity mingled with expectation. It was as if the transformation I bore in silence had woven itself into the very air I breathed, altering how I was seen and how I moved through the world. With this shift came new roles I had not sought, but could not refuse. The elders entrusted me with responsibilities that felt both heavy and unfamiliar. A keeper of forgotten lore, a mediator between old customs and the changing tides. In one village, I was asked to oversee a ritual long neglected, to guide those who sought healing. Through rites I barely understood, but was compelled to learn. The cloak of duty settled over my shoulders with a weight I could feel in every breath, as if the scar on my wrist was not just a mark of change, but a seal binding me to these new burdens. I was no longer merely a wanderer, but a thread in the fabric of something larger, a role that carried both honor and restraint. This transformation rippled outward, shifting the delicate balance of society in subtle yet profound ways. Some saw in me a symbol of hope, a living bridge between past and future, whose presence inspired quiet loyalty among those who yearned for guidance. Others regarded me with suspicion, eyes narrowing in the flickering torchlight of council halls, their voices laced with doubt and fear. My standing became a fulcrum upon which alliances shifted. Respect mingled uneasily with wariness. In marketplaces and gathering squares, murmurs trailed my passing, a testament to the unsettled currents my change had stirred. The response was not without conflict. There were clashes, unspoken tensions that simmered beneath the surface, erupting in sharp glances and veiled accusations. Yet in these moments, I witnessed also a fragile unity forming, as some rallied to my side, drawn by the clarity and purpose I now embodied. Their awe and loyalty became a quiet force, a counterbalance to the resistance that sought to push me back into shadow. It was a delicate dance of power and persuasion, where my presence alone could tilt the scales toward discord or harmony. Among these ripples, an unintended consequence emerged, one I had not foreseen and could scarcely bear. Jealousy festered in the hearts of those who had once claimed the paths I now walked. Old companions, once friends, turned away, some in silence, others with bitter words that cut deeper than any blade. Their rejection was a cold wind against the fragile warmth of my new purpose, a reminder that transformation often brings isolation as surely as it brings strength. This exile was not imposed by strangers, but born of fractured ties, a painful echo of the breaking that had begun within me. I felt this shift keenly, an alienation that settled beneath my skin like the chill of cold stone steps beneath bare feet. Yet beneath that loneliness lay a quiet pride, a recognition that to be different was to carry a weight both sacred and solitary. The world I moved through no longer mirrored the boy I had been. It reflected instead a figure carved from trials and marked by the scars of change. This duality shaped my every step, a rhythm of humility and resolve beating beneath the surface of my days. One evening, beneath the flickering glow of torches in a council chamber thick with the scent of burning oil and whispered counsel, I stood at the center of a gathering that would come to define my new place in the world. The heavy cloak of duty draped over my shoulders, the scar beneath my sleeve, a silent testament to the journey that had brought me here. Eyes turned toward me, some filled with hope, others shadowed by doubt, and I spoke not with the certainty of youth, but with the calm clarity forged from the breaking and remaking within. That moment embodied the shaping influence of my transformation, a turning point where personal change became a force that shaped the fate of many. But these ripples were only the first waves of a tide I could not escape. The quiet murmurs of villages swelled into insistent calls. Elders sent envoys bearing urgent words. Leaders summoned me to dimly lit chambers, heavy with incense and expectation. I found myself drawn into a web of societal duty, a leader's command, and whispers of a divine calling I could neither fully understand nor dismiss. The sky itself seemed to respond. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon as if nature conspired to mark the turning of an age, while strange symbols appeared in the flames of evening fires, their flickering shadows dancing like portents upon ancient walls. These signs of destiny were not gentle nudges, but persistent summons, a cadence that beat steadily beneath the surface of my days and nights. Stepping into this greater arena was like crossing a threshold that altered the very air I breathed. No longer a solitary traveler marked by personal transformation, I became a figure within a larger, unfolding drama, pulled into councils where voices rose and fell like tides, into battle plans whispered behind closed doors, into exile journeys that stripped comfort from my hands. The weight of expectation settled upon me like armor, heavy yet inescapable. Others demanded obedience and sacrifice. They looked to me for guidance through the turmoil that churned beyond familiar borders. Their eyes, lit by flickering torchlight in vast halls, held a mixture of hope and dread, as if in me they saw the fragile thread upon which the fate of many now hung. This mantle was both a burden and a call, pressing deep into my bones. Within me stirred a complex tide of fear, doubt, and a quiet, almost reluctant longing. I feared the path laid before me, the loss of what little peace I had claimed. Doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve, whispering that perhaps I was unworthy or ill-prepared for the weight I bore. Yet beneath that hesitation lay a subtle yearning, not for glory or power, but for clarity, for purpose beyond the fractured self I had once known. This inner conflict made each step uncertain, each breath heavy, with the knowledge that turning back was no longer an option. The currents of fate pulled me inexorably onward. The moment when resistance became impossible arrived not with thunder, but with a quiet ceremony beneath an ancient temple's shadow. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the murmured chants of those gathered. As I knelt before the gathered assembly, the talisman's scar beneath my sleeve seemed to burn anew, a silent witness to the transformation that had become my destiny. A leader, aged and solemn, placed an outstretched hand upon my shoulder, firm, unyielding, and spoke words that sealed the path ahead, a command to lead, to hold fast amidst the coming storm. In that moment, the tide closed around me, and I knew the journey was no longer mine alone. That ritual, bathed in torchlight and shadow, encapsulated the escalation that had swept me from the narrow streets of forgotten villages into the vast theater of fate. I was no longer simply the transformed scribe. I had become a symbol, a vessel for forces greater than myself. The voices in the council chamber, the distant drums of war, the murmurs of divine will, all converged upon this one point of reckoning. The world had shifted, and with it, my place within it. The scar on my wrist was no longer just a mark of personal change. It was a seal upon my soul, binding me to a destiny I could neither evade nor fully comprehend. As I reflected on this turning, I felt the full weight of what lay ahead. Destiny was no gentle guide, but a relentless tide that would sweep me forward, indifferent to my fears or desires. Each demand, each omen, each summons pressed upon me until only one path remained open. There was no retreat, no safe harbor where the boy I had once been could linger. The fate that had claimed me was vast and unyielding, its currents pulling me toward horizons shrouded in uncertainty. Yet destiny does not rise without cost, and soon sacrifice would be demanded of me. The circumstances were cruel and unyielding. A war raging beyond our borders, a betrayal whispered in the halls where trust once lived, and a ritual that required a price paid in absence and quiet grief. I understood that to embrace the path set before me, I must relinquish this connection, severing a thread that had woven warmth into the cold fabric of my journey. The moment of realization came softly, almost imperceptibly, like the slow falling of leaves in autumn light. It was in the lingering gaze of my beloved, the last shared breath before the dawn, that the unbearable weight of farewell pressed down. The offering was made beneath dim fires that flickered with uncertain flame, their smoke curling upward in solemn witness. The air was thick with the scent of incense and wet earth, mingling with the salt of tears that traced silent paths down my cheeks. I felt the roughness of the worn cloth as I clasped a hand for the final time, the pulse fading beneath my fingers like a fragile flame snuffed out by the cold wind. The silence that followed was a cavernous void, deeper than any battle's roar or council's clamor. It settled around me like a shroud, muffling the once vibrant rhythms of life until only a hollow echo remained. Each breath tasted bitter, mingled with the dryness of the bread I ate in solitude. The absence weighed heavily, a presence of its own that filled the spaces where laughter and light had dwelled. In the quiet that stretched endlessly, I grappled with the ache that seeped into my bones and spirit. The loss carved new hollows within me, reshaping the contours of my resolve. Yet from this wound, a hard-earned clarity emerged. Strength was not born of unbroken joy, but forged in the crucible of relinquishment. Humility took root where pride had once flourished, teaching me that to lead, I must bear the burden of letting go. The scar upon my wrist, once a symbol of transformation, now bore witness to this deeper sacrifice. It became a relic of what was lost and what must never be forgotten, a vow etched in flesh and memory. Others around me responded in kind. Grief softened their eyes, respect tempered their words, and a reverent silence often fell in my presence. Some spoke in hushed tones of the cost I bore, while others cast cautious glances, as if wary that sorrow might unmoor the fragile hope we clung to. This shared mourning became a silent bond among those who understood that sacrifice was the soil in which our future would grow. Yet even as grief hollowed me, I sensed that this was only the first of many offerings destiny would demand. The first sacrifice did not end the cost. It was only the beginning of a greater weight settling into my bones and marrow. As days folded into nights, new duties pressed upon me like an unrelenting tide. The elders' expectations grew heavier, their hopes carried on words I was bound to fulfill. I became keeper not only of forgotten lore, but also of fragile alliances between wary villages, each demand a thread tightening around my neck. Losses multiplied quietly, faces faded from memory, trust withered in shadowed corners, and the future narrowed beneath the ever-darkening sky. The burden was no longer a sudden wound, but a slow, grinding presence that shaped every step forward. Physically, my body bore the strain, as if time itself conspired against me. Fatigue settled deep, a constant companion beneath my skin. Scars from past trials itched beneath the weight of my heavy cloak, and hunger gnawed with a sharpness that no bread could fully ease. My hands grew calloused and rough, clutching scrolls and relics with trembling resolve. Nights stretched long and cold, the smoke of distant fires clinging to my hair and clothes, a reminder of battles fought in silence. Each breath came labored, as if the very air was thick with the weight I carried, and my shadow lengthened endlessly across the cracked earth beneath my feet. Within me, the emotional weight grew heavier still. Grief settled like a slow fog, obscuring moments of joy and clouding the clarity I once sought. Fear whispered in quiet moments, the fear of failing those who looked to me, of unraveling the fragile tapestry of hope. Doubt gnawed endlessly, a murmur beneath my thoughts that questioned every choice and every step. The loneliness was profound, even amid the murmurs and footsteps of others. Though surrounded by faces and voices, the pain was mine alone to shoulder, an invisible load that no companion's hand could ease. I learned that some burdens are solitary, carried in the silent chambers of the heart. The cloak I wore became more than mere cloth. It was a symbol of the weight I bore. Heavy and worn, its fabric pressed against my skin, like the past itself, unforgiving yet inseparable. Each fold held the scent of smoke and earth, the faint trace of incense from ritual fires, and the subtle sharpness of dried blood. It was a shroud of responsibility, a constant reminder that I was wrapped tightly in the fate of many, bound by threads I could neither see nor sever. The cloak pulled at my shoulders, a tangible echo of the invisible chains that tethered me to a destiny I did not choose but could not escape. There was a moment when the weight nearly overwhelmed me, a silence so deep it threatened to swallow all light. I stood alone beneath a sky bruised with storm, the distant drums of approaching conflict echoing in my ears, like the pounding of my own heart. My knees buckled, and I sank to the rough stone ground, breath shallow and ragged. The cold bit into my flesh, sweat mingling with the dust and sweat of long days. For a fleeting instant, the burden crushed me toward breaking, and the world blurred at the edges of my vision. Yet even as darkness crept near, a quiet voice within urged me to rise, to endure just a little longer. What carried me forward was not grand or loud, but a simple persistence rooted in silent faith. Rituals repeated in the quiet hours, touching the worn edges of my cloak, whispering prayers to unseen forces, and holding close the memory of that first great sacrifice. In these acts, I found a steady rhythm, a tether to something beyond the immediate weight pressing down. Endurance became a vow, a quiet promise to myself and those who depended on me. I learned that strength was not the absence of burden, but the will to carry it, step by heavy step, through the endless march of days. But the greater the burden grew, the clearer it became. I was being led toward a trial of endurance that would test the limits of my soul. Days bled into nights with little respite, and the road stretched endlessly, a cruel ribbon of dust and stone beneath my weary feet. Hunger gnawed relentlessly at my gut, thirst parched my throat until each breath tasted like dry ash. My limbs ached with the weight of unseen wounds, muscles screaming beneath skin blistered by sun and sweat. The cloak that once symbolized my burden now felt like a shroud, trapping heat and heaviness around my shoulders, each step a negotiation with pain and exhaustion. Inside my mind, darker battles raged. Doubt settled like a shadow, clouding my thoughts with whispers that urged surrender. Fear of failing those who depended on me crept in, entwined with despair that threatened to drown the flickering flame of hope. At times, my vision blurred, edges softening into hallucinations born of delirium, faces long lost, voices calling me to rest in silence, the seductive pull of oblivion, the weight of solitude wrapped tighter around my heart, a cold chain that clinked with every faltering breath. There were moments when the world seemed to tilt, when my knees buckled beneath me, and the abyss yawned wide enough to swallow my resolve whole. One such moment came beneath a sky swollen with storm clouds, the distant rumble of thunder echoing the pounding of my heart. My body trembled uncontrollably. Sweat and dust coated my skin, mingling with the sour taste of the stale water long gone. I collapsed onto the jagged earth, breath shallow, vision dimming, as the world spun and whispered threats too terrible to name. The silence that followed was thick, a void pressing against my senses, and I teetered on the edge of surrender, ready to slip beneath the weight that crushed me. Yet, even in that abyss, a faint voice stirred within, a vow made in the quiet hours before the sacrifice, a memory of hands once held and promises carved into flesh. That spark, fragile and fleeting, kindled a stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished. With that flicker of will, I rose again, each movement slow and deliberate, a meditation in endurance. The road did not relent, nor did the pain, but I learned to carry it differently, step by heavy step. My hands brushed against rough stones, the coarse texture grounding me in the present. The scent of dust and distant rain filled my nostrils, a reminder that the world still moved beyond my suffering. Breaths came in ragged rhythm, a mantra of survival, whispered between exhaustion and determination. Time lost meaning as the slow march continued, each heartbeat a drumbeat in the ritual of endurance I had unwillingly embraced. Then came the moment that would etch itself into my soul, the dawn breaking over the horizon, pale light spilling like fragile hope across the barren land. I stood at the edge of the world, the last step before the unknown, and as the first rays touched my face, a cry rose from deep within me, a release of all the pain, fear, and doubt wrapped in a silence broken only by the wind. That cry was not victory, but survival, a testament that though broken, I remained unyielding. The rising sun painted my scarred skin and weary eyes with light, a symbol of endurance that whispered of new beginnings, even in the shadow of hardship. Surviving the trial taught me a harsh humility, a clarity born not of triumph, but of raw survival. I learned that resilience is not the absence of breaking, but the courage to rise when broken. Each scar became a chapter in the story of persistence, each breath a quiet rebellion against despair. The ordeal stripped away illusions and left me with a steadiness forged in pain and quiet strength. In that crucible, I found a deeper understanding of my own limits and the fragile threads that hold us together in the face of relentless trials. Surviving the trial did not end my journey. It opened the path toward the wisdom I had yet to claim. The world around me held its breath, and in that stillness, a subtle illumination unfolded, soft as the light that filters through mist. It was not a sudden blaze, but a gradual dawning, a gentle unveiling of truths that had been buried beneath the weight of suffering and endurance. I found myself perched on the edge of a quiet hill, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and distant rain, the first rays of morning spilling gold over the horizon. The sky stretched wide and open, pale and endless, as if the universe itself had paused to offer me this moment of revelation. The light grew steadily warmer, and with it came a vision, not a dream nor a voice, but a profound seeing. I watched as the sun's fingers reached across the land, touching each scar and shadow with tender hope. In that moment, a simple truth unfolded within me. Suffering was not a curse to be endured in silence, but a river through which one must pass to reach deeper understanding. I saw that my scars, the pain etched into flesh and soul, were not marks of defeat, but maps of a journey toward something greater, a destiny not set by fate alone, but carved by sacrifice and choice. The realization settled like a gentle flame, steady and unwavering, lighting a path through the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. This truth shifted something deep inside me. It was as if a heavy veil lifted, revealing a vast landscape of peace where once there had been only turmoil. My heart grew quiet, no longer thrumming with frantic fear, but beating with a calm strength born of humility and acceptance. I understood that strength was not the absence of weakness, but the courage to move forward despite it. The restless questions that had clawed at my mind softened into patient inquiry, and the jagged edges of doubt smoothed into thoughtful reflection. This clarity did not erase the scars or the memories of pain, but it wove them into a tapestry of resilience and purpose. I was changed, not triumphant, but transformed. In my hand, I held a small relic, a smooth stone worn by time and travel, its surface cool and grounding against my palm. It became a symbol of this newfound wisdom, steady, unassuming, yet enduring through the relentless passage of days and trials. Like that stone, I would carry the lessons of my journey quietly, its weight a reminder of the strength found in stillness and perseverance. This simple token anchored me to the present, a tangible connection to the illumination that now guided my steps. Those around me began to sense the change as well. It was not spoken or declared, but felt in the way my gaze steadied, in the silence I carried that no longer echoed with unrest. Companions who once looked upon me with concern now met my presence with a quiet respect, a recognition of the calm authority that comes not from command, but from lived experience. Strangers paused in their hurried paths to meet eyes that held a depth of understanding, rare and unspoken. The transformation was subtle, like the shift of seasons, yet unmistakable to those who knew where to look. Life resumed its course, the world unchanged in its ceaseless turning, yet I moved through it with a different rhythm. The same winds whispered through the trees. The same stars traced their ancient paths across the night sky, but I perceived them anew, each breath a gift, each moment a thread in the unfolding tapestry of existence. The burdens remained, but they were now carried with a steadiness that tempered their weight. The hunger for meaning was sated not by answers alone, but by the acceptance that wisdom often dwells in the spaces between certainty and doubt. This deeper calm settled into my bones, a quiet companion alongside the scars and memories I bore. But wisdom without action is only a shadow, and soon I would be called to act upon what I had seen. The first time I put my newfound understanding to the test came unexpectedly beneath the low, heavy beams of the council hall, where shadows flickered like restless spirits in the torchlight. The air was thick with the scent of burning oil and aged parchment, mingling with the faint, earthy aroma of rain-soaked earth drifting through open shutters. Around me, faces gathered, some weary, others sharp with suspicion, each waiting for guidance amid the chaos that war had sown between our villages. The moment demanded more than silent reflection. It called for a decision shaped by the truths I had come to hold close. The council was divided, voices rising in heated debate over whether to strike preemptively against a neighboring tribe rumored to be gathering forces. Fear and anger fueled calls for swift retaliation, but my heart, tempered by the quiet flame of the wisdom, resisted the tide of the vengeance. I stood slowly, the weight of the carved wooden staff in my hand grounding me as I spoke with a calmness that surprised even myself. Instead of urging war, I proposed a path of mercy and cautious diplomacy, a choice to send envoys bearing gifts and open hands rather than weapons. It was a choice born not from weakness, but from the recognition that suffering could be met with understanding, and that survival required more than bloodshed. The hall fell into a hush, the crackle of torches the only sound as my words settled like stones cast gently into still water. This decision shifted the currents of the council's mood. Some nodded slowly, their eyes reflecting a dawning respect for a voice that dared to challenge the familiar drumbeats of conflict. Others met me with silence, their brows knit in doubt, fingers tightening around the hilts of swords they had not yet sheathed. Yet the gesture of extending peace became a symbol in itself, a fragile bridge woven from the threads of courage and restraint. The envoys sent forth carried not only gifts, but the quiet hope that the flame of understanding could burn steadily amid the storm of suspicion. That wooden staff I held became more than a tool. It was a beacon of the path I had chosen, a steady anchor amid shifting tides. Inside, I felt a trembling confidence take root. The calm that had blossomed in my heart during those long nights of reflection now found voice and form. It was a strength not loud or boastful, but sure and steady, like the heartbeat beneath the skin of the earth, slow and unyielding. To act upon the wisdom I carried was to step beyond the safety of thought into the uncertain world of consequence, and though fear whispered at the edges, it was drowned by the clarity of purpose. Each breath filled me with the warmth of resolve, each step forward a quiet declaration that the path of sacrifice and understanding was one I was ready to walk. Not all welcomed this change. Resistance surfaced in subtle murmurs and guarded glances. Some old allies questioned my judgment in hushed tones, their voices laced with skepticism and a hint of betrayal. Others dismissed the peace offering as folly, a naive gesture in a world ruled by blades and blood. I felt the sting of isolation, the cold shadow of doubt, creeping at the edges of my certainty. Yet, the softness of the morning air and the steady pulse of my own heart reminded me that true strength often grows in the soil of opposition. The quiet defiance of my choice became a testament to the resilience born of wisdom. The days that followed were marked by a cautious hope. The envoys returned bearing news of tentative acceptance, of wary hands unclenching and eyes meeting without immediate threat. Small gestures, a shared meal, a lowered spear, began to stitch together fragile threads of peace. The council chambers, once heavy with discord, now echoed with quieter conversations and measured plans. Around me, the change was felt as a subtle shift in the air, a deeper calm settling like soft rain on parched ground. Life continued, its relentless rhythm unchanged, yet I moved within it as one who carries a lantern through twilight, a steady light amidst gathering dusk. This outward engagement did not diminish the weight of my inner journey. Rather, it gave it form and direction. The wisdom I had gleaned in silence now lived in every measured word, every deliberate step toward reconciliation. It was no longer an abstract truth, but a living force, shaping the world in small but vital ways. The wooden staff in my hand, worn smooth by grasp and time, stood as a symbol of this commitment, a tangible reminder that wisdom must be wielded with care and courage. Each gesture of peace was both a gift and a challenge, a promise that understanding could endure even in the harshest soil. But no wisdom lives untested, and soon the conflict that awaited me would sharpen every truth I had spoken into the edge of survival. Wisdom untested is only silence, and soon mine was called to speak in the storm. It came in the form of the council's unrest, those elders and warriors who clung tightly to the old ways, their faces shadowed by flickering firelight, eyes sharp with accusation. They could not abide the mercy I had offered, nor the fragile peace I had sought to weave between our villages. Their opposition was a tempest of words and glances, a rising tide against the calm I tried to hold. They named my choice folly, whispered that my counsel would bring ruin, and some openly declared that my mercy was weakness that endangered all we had fought to protect. The challenge was swift and unforgiving. At the next gathering, beneath the vaulted beams, heavy with smoke and the scent of burning oil, I found myself surrounded by voices that sought to unravel the very truth I carried. They spoke of betrayal, of naive softness in the face of enemies. The air grew thick with tension, the murmurs swelling until the hall seemed to pulse with the weight of their doubt. I felt the cold pressure of their judgment, as keen as any blade, the bitterness of their words settling like ash in my throat. Their challenge was clear: abandon this path of mercy, or be cast out as a traitor to the survival of our people. The clash came not in battle, but in the storm of accusation and defense. Raised hands silenced some, while others stepped forward with clenched fists and voices like thunder, demanding a return to war. I stood firm. The carved wooden staff I carried a steady weight against the tremor in my hands. My voice, though quieter than their fury, cut through the chaos with deliberate calm. I spoke of strength that grows not from cruelty, but from restraint, of survival built on understanding rather than destruction. The firelight danced on my face, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the resolve I summoned. The clash was a crucible, each word a strike against the doubts that sought to fracture my conviction. Yet, in the depths of that storm, a moment of doubt seized me. For a heartbeat, the silence that followed my words felt like a void, the weight of opposition pressing so heavily that my resolve wavered. Could this wisdom, born in quiet reflection, truly withstand the harsh winds of suspicion and fear? The faces around me blurred, their eyes hard and unyielding. The taste of bitterness lingered, a dryness in my mouth, as if the very air had thickened with threat. In that fragile pause, I questioned if my truth was enough to hold back the coming darkness. But then, I chose to stand firm. The vow I had sealed in silence and sacrifice rose within me like a steady flame. I spoke again, not with the desperation of one pleading for acceptance, but with the certainty of one who has borne the weight of loss and found strength in renunciation. Our path is not paved with the blood of needless war, I declared, but with the courage to seek peace where others see only enemies. The staff in my hand was planted firmly on the rough stone floor, a gesture of unwavering commitment. This stand was not a surrender to the storm, but a quiet defiance that refused to be extinguished. The conflict ended not in triumph, but with survival. The council fractured, some retreating into silence, others grudgingly acknowledging the possibility of a different way. The hall emptied with a heavy stillness, the scent of smoke lingering like a memory of fire that had passed but left its mark. I felt the weight of what was lost, the trust of some, the warmth of old alliances, but also the fragile seed of hope that this tested wisdom might yet endure. The wooden staff bore a fresh crack, a subtle scar carved by the force of the clash, symbolizing the cost of standing true in a world that seeks to break what it does not understand. In the quiet that followed, I learned that wisdom is not a shield against the storm, but the root that must hold fast as winds rage around it. It is tested in the harshest fires, and though it may scar, it does not yield. The bitterness of opposition and the salt of wounded pride became part of the path I walked, reminders that every truth carries its own burden. The clash had sharpened my resolve, carving deeper into me the understanding that to lead is to endure, and to endure is to remain steady when all else trembles. This was not the final storm, It was only the first wave of greater conflicts that destiny was yet to bring against me. The horizon darkened with the promise of trials more severe, where the strength of my wisdom would be called not just to survive, but to shape the very fate of the lands and people I had sworn to guide. What began as murmurs of dissent swelled into a chorus of opposition that no single voice could quell. The enemies I once faced as isolated sparks now burned like a spreading wildfire, armies of suspicion, councils emboldened by fear, and factions determined to undo the fragile peace I had forged. Their numbers multiplied beyond what I could have foreseen, each new adversary adding weight to the mounting tempest that threatened to engulf all I had built. They sought not merely to oppose me, but to erase the very legacy I carried. My teachings, once whispered reverently around fires, were twisted and rewritten by those who wished to corrupt their meaning. Scrolls and carvings bearing my words were defaced or stolen. My name became a whispered curse in some villages, a mark of weakness and betrayal. The sanctuaries of knowledge where I had poured my soul were ransacked, their relics shattered and scattered like fallen leaves in a storm. It was as though the shadow of oblivion stretched long and dark, intent on swallowing the light I had kindled. Amid this rising chaos, betrayals stung the deepest. Allies I had trusted, who once stood beside me in council and ceremony, turned away or fell silent when their voices were needed most. Some withdrew under pressure, their loyalty corroded by fear or ambition, leaving me isolated in the gathering dark. The silence of those once steadfast was a bitter draught, as sharp and cold as the rain that soaked my weary skin during long nights of vigil. The wounds of these betrayals reopened old scars, and I learned anew that trust, like flame, must be tended, or it dies. The stage for the great confrontation was set beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and smoke. Our village, once a place of quiet reflection, became a fortress under siege from suspicion and rage. Torches flared against the gathering dusk, casting flickering shadows on banners torn and twisted by wind and conflict. Faces I once knew were now twisted with anger, voices raised in accusation and defiance. The hall where wisdom was once shared now echoed with the roar of clashing wills. At the height of this clash, the air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and sweat, the roar of voices rising like thunder over the pounding of rain against stone. Steel rang out as guards loyal to the old ways challenged those who embraced change. And I stood in the midst of it all, the weight of countless eyes heavy upon me. The taste of ash and bitterness filled my mouth, mingling with the dryness of fear that clutched at my throat. The storm was no longer only outside. It raged within the hearts of my people and within myself. Near ruin came swiftly after. My legacy, once a beacon, flickered dangerously in the face of relentless assault. Scrolls were burned in the public square, the smoke rising like a funeral pyre to the darkening sky. I was driven to the brink of exile, forced to flee the home I had nurtured, my body bearing new scars from the violence that sought to silence my voice forever. The weight of near death pressed down on me, and for a time, it seemed that all I had fought for would be lost to shadow and time. The symbol of this threat was a shattered relic, once a staff carved with ancient symbols and worn smooth by generations. It lay broken at my feet, splintered wood stained with the dust of conflict, a tangible reminder that even the strongest foundations can fracture under the strain of hatred and fear. That broken staff became a silent testament to the cost of endurance, a mark of the storm's fury and the fragility of what I carried. Yet I survived, barely escaping the collapse that sought to erase me. I held fast to the truth that had guided me through darkness. Though scarred and weary, I remained standing, my spirit tempered by trials that would have broken lesser resolve. I carried the weight of loss and betrayal, but also the unyielding flame of hope that wisdom, though fragile, endures beyond the ruin of stone and word. The scars upon my body and spirit were badges of survival, proof that legacy is not a fortress, but a flickering flame that must be protected through every night. From this crucible, I understood that legacy is a delicate thing, less a monument carved in stone than a fragile flame passed hand to hand. It demands vigilance, sacrifice, and the courage to face not only enemies without, but doubts within. It is a memory that can be threatened, distorted, and nearly extinguished, but never fully destroyed if one holds steadfast. This knowledge settled deep within me, a quiet resolve shaped by fire and shadow. Yet I knew this was not the final reckoning. The deepest confrontation would not come from the world outside, but from within my own destiny. Even as the storm waned and silence returned, I felt the pulse of something greater, an intimate reckoning waiting beyond the horizon of conflict. The legacy I bore was but the surface of a path that would lead me inward toward truths far more profound and perilous than any battle fought in the open air. I found myself alone in a cave carved deep into the ancient earth, the cold stone walls pressing close like the weight of unseen judgment. Outside, the wilderness stretched vast and indifferent, but within this hollow refuge, time seemed to slow, folding inward until nothing existed but the quiet pulse of my own breath. Here, away from the clamor of voices and clashing wills, I was forced to face the demand that destiny had long placed upon me, a duty heavier than any council's decree or warrior's sword. It was a vow etched not in ink, but in the marrow of my bones, a prophecy whispered by the scars I bore, that I must carry the burden of transformation, even if it meant breaking myself in the process. Yet fear clung to me like shadow. Doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve, and regret seeped into the hollow spaces of my heart. Had I faltered? Was my mercy a weakness that led us here? I wrestled with guilt for those lost, for the bridges burned, and for the silence of those who once pledged loyalty but turned away. The memories crowded me, each a heavy stone pressing down, threatening to extinguish the fragile flame of hope I still held. Then, in the stillness, came the reckoning, a vision as sudden and clear as the stars piercing the night sky outside. It was not a voice spoken aloud, but a profound silence that spoke volumes, a sudden knowing that trembled through my very soul. Images flickered like candlelight, faces of those I had failed, the broken relic in my hands, the path I had walked winding endlessly ahead. In that moment, I understood that destiny was not a chain to bind me, but a path I had already chosen, step by painful step. The awareness of mortality settled over me like a cool breath. I felt the frailty of my own flesh, the slow ache of wounds, both old and new, the inevitable tide of time drawing close. Life I realized, was a fleeting ember, bright but brief, and my place within the vast story of existence was but a single thread woven into an endless tapestry. With this clarity came acceptance, quiet and profound. I did not resist what destiny demanded. Instead, I surrendered to it with a solemn resolve. There was peace in this letting go, a calm that settled like the warmth of a flame against the chill of stone. The scar that pulsed upon my skin, once a mark of pain and transformation, now became my anchor, a living symbol of the moment when I ceased to fight and began to understand. Its steady throb was a reminder that even in brokenness, there is strength. In that silence, I saw destiny not as chains forged to imprison, but as the path I had already walked, etched in scars, memories, and choices. It was a flame to carry, not a burden to bear alone. For in that surrender, I saw the shape of the final step, not my struggle alone, but the legacy that would outlive me. My final days unfolded in quiet simplicity, far from the turmoil that once threatened to consume all I held dear. In a humble chamber, warmed by the gentle glow of a single candle burning low, I lay surrounded by the faint scent of earth and incense, the air cool but soothing against my skin. The world outside continued its endless turning, the rustle of leaves and distant laughter of children weaving through the silence like a gentle lullaby. As I felt the weight of my journey gently lift, I understood that this was the closing chapter, not an end, but a gentle return home. What I left behind was not grand monuments or towering statues, but words inscribed on fragile parchment, stories woven through whispered teachings, and deeds carried quietly in the hearts of those who listened. My scars, once a mark of pain and struggle, became stories told beside flickering fires, lessons of mercy, courage, and change whispered into the night. The flame I had guarded so fiercely was no longer mine alone. It had passed into the hands of students, children, even strangers who found strength in its flicker. Their voices carried forward what I could no longer say, their footsteps tracing the path I had begun, bending it to new horizons, yet rooted in the same enduring light. A simple flame, flickering steadily in the darkness, became the symbol of all I hoped to leave behind. It was a quiet monument, alive and breathing, not carved in stone, but kindled in souls. This flame, delicate yet unyielding, danced in the wind and weathered storms, much like the legacy it represented, a quiet fire meant to warm, to guide, and to endure beyond the reach of time. It was in that flame that I saw the endless thread connecting past and future, a light carried forward by unseen hands, a beacon in the night for those still finding their way. Time, I realized, was no longer a cage, but a flowing river where my story merged with countless others. The legacy I left did not fade with the passing years. It echoed across time, a persistent whisper beneath the roar of history. It lived in the silent moments of reflection, in the shared stories around fires, in the gentle kindness of strangers who never knew my name but felt its warmth. This eternal thread wove through generations, unbroken and unyielding, a testament to the simple truth that what we give is never lost but transformed, carried forward in ways unseen and unexpected. Reflecting on the path I had walked, I found no regrets, no wasted steps. Every scar, every bitter memory, every fleeting moment of doubt had been part of a whole, an intricate tapestry of light and shadow that shaped who I was and what I became. The journey was complete, each chapter folded into the next, a story told not with finality, but with a quiet completeness that settled deep within. I was no longer bound by the struggles that once defined me. Instead, I was part of something larger, a living thread in a vast and endless fabric. And so, though my voice has fallen silent, the story lingers, like a whisper that carries through the ages. It moves softly on the wind, touches the heart of those who listen, and glows quietly in the flame that never dies. Sleep then, for the night is gentle, and morning will remember